but we'll be doing it both in English and Oriya, so that our friends from outside can also understand it. We'll be not entirely doing it in English, of course. We'll be doing it primarily in Oriya, and we'll be trying to give you a summary of whatever we discuss. And I must thank each one of you who are here with us. And, without the audience, nothing is possible. I'm reminded of a Hindi song, Agar Tum Na Hote. But this morning seems to be, we have to manage with whatever little audience we have with us. ମୁଁ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ ଏବେ ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବା ଆମେ ଯେ ଏ ସେସନ୍ ଯେହେତୁ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ ହିଁ ଥିଲା ତ ଆମେ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ ହିଁ କଥା ହବା ଏବଂ ଆମର ଏ ପ୍ୟାନେଲରେ ଆଜି ଅନେକ ଲବ୍ଧ ପ୍ରତିଷ୍ଠିତ ସାହିତ୍ୟିକ ଆମ ସହିତ ବସିବେ ବୋଲି ଆମର ଆଶା ଥିଲା କିନ୍ତୁ କାରଣ କ'ଣ ମୁଁ ଠିକ ସେ ଜାଣିନି ମେ ବି ଆଜି ଛୁଟି ଦିନ ବା ଅନ୍ୟ କୌଣସି କାରଣରୁ ସେମାନେ ଆମ ସହିତ ନାହାନ୍ତି କିନ୍ତୁ ବିଶେଷ କିଛି ଅସୁବିଧା ନାହିଁ ପ୍ରଥମେ ମୁଁ କ୍ଷମା ମାଗି ନେବି ଯେ ଆମେ ବହୁତ ବିଳମ୍ବରେ ସେସନ ଷ୍ଟାର୍ଟ କରୁଛୁ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଏ ସେସନ ସରିବା କଥା 9ଟାରୁ 10ଟା କିନ୍ତୁ ଆମେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବାକୁ ଯାଉଛେ ଏବଂ ମତେ କୁହାସରିଛି ଯେ ଆମେ ଅଳ୍ପ ସମୟ ପାଇଁ ଏ ସେସନ ଜାରି ରଖିବା କାହିଁକି ନା ତାଙ୍କର ତାପରେ ପରେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକ୍ରମ ରହିଛି ତେଣୁ ଗୋଟେ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ଭଲ ଯେହେତୁ ଆମର ବେଶୀ ବକ୍ତା ନାହାନ୍ତି ବା ବେଶୀ ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିତ୍ୱ ଆମ ସହିତ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଯୋଡେଇ ହେଇ ପାରିନାହାନ୍ତି ସାହିତ୍ୟିକ ଯୋଡେଇ ହେଇ ପାରିନାହାନ୍ତି ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ଅଳ୍ପ ଅଳ୍ପ କହିକି ସାରିଦେବୁ କିନ୍ତୁ ମୁଁ ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କୁ ଗୋଟିଏ କଥା ପ୍ରଥମରୁ କହି ରଖେ ଯେ ଏଠି ଯୋଉ ଦୁଇ ଜଣ ଉପସ୍ଥିତ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସାହିତ୍ୟିକ ମଞ୍ଚରେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ପରିଚୟ କରିବାର କୌଣସି ପରିଚିତ ତାଙ୍କର ସେମାନେ ଏତେ ଅଧିକ ପରିଚିତ ଯେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ପରିଚୟ ଦବାର ବା ତାଙ୍କ ପରିଚୟ ଦବାର କୌଣସି ଆବଶ୍ୟକତା ମୁଁ ଅନୁଭବ କରୁନି ଅନ୍ତତଃ ଜଣେ ହେଉଛନ୍ତି ଶ୍ରୀ ରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ବେହେରା ଯାହାଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଜାଣିଛୁ ଏବଂ ସାର୍ ବୋଲି ଡାକୁ ଆଉ ଶ୍ରୀମତୀ ଅପର୍ଣ୍ଣା ମହାନ୍ତି ଯିଏକି ଆମ ସମୟର ଜଣେ ନିହାତି ଶକ୍ତିଶାଳୀ ଏବଂ ଜଣାଶୁଣା କବି ଉଭୟ ଏଠି ଉପସ୍ଥିତ ଅଛନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ଯୋଉ ବିଷୟଟି ଦିଆଯାଇଛି ସେ ବିଷୟଟି କିନ୍ତୁ ବହୁତ ବ୍ୟାପକ ୱାଇଡ୍ କ୍ୟାନଭାସ୍ ଯାହାକୁ କୁହାଯାଏ ବିଷୟଟି ବହୁତ ବ୍ୟାପକ ଲାଇଫ୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ ଲିଟରେଚର ଆଣ୍ଡ ଲାଇଫ୍ ବହୁତ ବ୍ୟାପକ ତେଣୁ ଆମେ କଥା ହେଇଛୁ ଯେ ଆମେ ଅଳ୍ପ ଅଳ୍ପରେ ସାରିବୁ ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ ପ୍ରଥମେ ଅପର୍ଣ୍ଣା ମ୍ୟାଡମଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରିବି ସେ ଜଣେ କବି ହିସାବରେ ସେ ସାଧାରଣତଃ ଜଣେ ଅଧ୍ୟାପିକା ଥିଲେ ଅଧ୍ୟାପିକା କମ୍ ମତେ ଲାଗେ ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିଗତ ଭାବରେ କବି ବେଶୀ ଲାଗନ୍ତି ମତେ ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କୁ କବି ଭାବରେ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରିବି ସେ ଜୀବନକୁ କିଭଳି ଭାବରେ ଦେଖନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ସାହିତ୍ୟକୁ କିଭଳି ଭାବରେ ଦେଖନ୍ତି ସେ ସମ୍ପର୍କରେ କିଛି କହିବେ ପ୍ରଥମେ ସେ ସାହିତ୍ୟକୁ ନ ଯାଇକିରି ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରିବି ଜୀବନକୁ କିଭଳି ଭାବରେ ଦେଖନ୍ତି ଜଣେ କବି ଭାବରେ ସେ ସମ୍ପର୍କରେ ଆମକୁ ଟିକେ କହିବେ ମ୍ୟାଡାମ
धन्यवाद दीपक बाबू सार अच्छा सार को प्रणाम एठी प्रथमे मो श्रीजुक्त रामचंद्र बेहेरा मोर शिक्षक मु तांकर छात्री अनेक समय साहित्य को लेकिन जीवन को लेकिन कथबार्ता हो थे तांका संगे कथबार्ता हो कही से मते अरे अपर्णा आमे लेखा लेखी कहीं कर मु कहली सर कहीं लेखा लेखी कर ना भितर किसी गोटे दुख अच्छी बड़ व्यथा अच्छी ताकू व्यक्त करने को बोधे आम लेखा लेखी कर मु कहली हाँ सर सैया ना अच्छा कहलु ये एते लेखा लेखी कर दुख पाइबा और लेखा लेखी करने अपेक्षा टिके सुखरे रही जीवन टा कौन आरे टिके सुंदर हो न मु नीरव रही प्रकृत जीवन सुंदर होता कि न होता से प्रश्न मो पाखे आज भी अच्छी किंतु जीवन रे जदि जिते गोटे स्पर्श प्रवण मनीष बड़ दुख पाए पीड़ा पाए एवं से पीड़ा को किए केते प्रकार रे व्यक्त करती किंतु जीवन पीड़ा को जदि सृजनशीलतार व्यक्त करि पारे लेखालेखी करि पारे मु भावे से पीड़ा जीवन को धन्य कर दिए एवं मु सब जहाँ सब दुख पाई जीवन रे बहुत दुख पाई से दुखर कथा जीवन कथा मु कौन कहबी सान बेले मोर पितामाता जने स्वाधीनता संग्रामी थिले घोर दारिद्र्य भितर स्वेच्छा दारिद्र्य से माने वरण करथिले से दारिद्र्य भितर मध्य से माने खुशी थिले से खुशीटा मध्य मो भितर रहिथिला जने सन्यासी पाखरे वैकुंठनाथ ब्रह्मचारी पाखरे पिला दिन कटिथिला सेते बेले गोटे आध्यात्मिकता भितर जीवन कटिथिला साहित्य रचना करी बेली सेते भाबी नथिली किंतु भितर भितर जेमती कविता दाना बांधुथिला जीवन से गोटे खुशी थिला आनंद थिला किंतु ता भितर अभाव बोध भी थिला आमे खूब गरीब थिलु किंतु से गरीब को नहीं कि गोटे गर्व मध्य थिला जे आमे देश पई बापा मा काम करचंती सेति पई गरीब होइचंती तेनो सेही कथा नहीं कि जते बेले किंतु प्रकृतर जीवन रो संघर्ष आरंभ हैला मोर विवाह परे मु देखिली गोटे स्त्री लोकर जीवन संघर्ष केते व्यापक केते जटिल एवं ताकू मु केमिति व्यक्त करबी स्त्री लोकटीए कौन करे ना पागलामी बाहर करे बेले बेले मो भितरे आत्महत्या कला भलिया मध्य प्रवणता सृष्टि होईची किंतु सेही समय जेमती कविता हाथ धरी पकेला मु ताकू व्यक्त करबा को जाय कि लेखि पकेली एवं वैकुंठनाथ ब्रह्मचारी मते जेते पिला दिने पाली थिले से कहिथिले सब बेले सत्य कहबो मिछ कहबोनी एवं गोटे बाड़ी मजा कथा छोट बेले कहिथिले सत्य कहिले रसगोल्ला मिछ कहिले कान मोडा सेटा केमती अभ्यास रे पड़ी जाइथिला तेणु मोटे मन रे गोटे साहस बांधिला एते भोगुची जो एते कष्ट पाउची मो सत्य कहबी मो भितर कोनटा आसुची सत्य कहबी तेणु कवितारे सेही सत्य कथा गुडिक बाहर पड़िला एवं जेते बेले सत्य कथा कहिली कवितारे उच्छ्वास हे गली सेते बेले बंचिबार गोटे आउ गोटे नुआ पर्याय आरंभ हला ए जीवन सहित ए संघर्ष रु सेते बेले खूब कष्ट पाउथिली किंतु जीवन संघर्ष रे ए पर्याय रे जेते बेले साहित्य मो पाखरे आसी पहुंचिला बंचिबार गोटे नुआ उन्मादना भी सृष्टि हैला तो जीवन सहित साहित्य जीवन को एमती सहयोग करथिला आज पर्यंत करूची
मोर जा मन पड़ुची थरे आमर विशिष्ट कवि रमाकांत रथ कहते जो माने जीवन को कविता भली बंचंती से माने कविता लिखंती नहीं जीवन को जे कविता न करि परिबो से ही केवल कविता लिखिबो एवं वर्तमान जहाँ अपना मैडम कहले आपण मान सुनिले जीवन में आमर किछि दुख थिले किछि अभाव थिले किछि ग्लानि थिले आमे साधारणतः साहित्य आड़कू मुहाई थाउ किंतु एटा गोटे कथा मु कहबा उचित माने करिवे जे जेतबेले वामावादी चिंताधारार कथा एते आसी नथिला से समय रे जोटा अपना मैडम कहले से जेहेतु सत कहते से नारीकर नारीकर जंत्रणा कथा ही कहते से जंत्रणा कथा ही तांको कविता रे प्रतिफलित हुए एवं गोटे नारी सपक्ष रे शाणित स्वर तांकर रहिछि एवं मोर धारणा जे रहिबो से कविता लेखुथिबा पर्यंत वर्तमान मु अनुरोध करिवि रामचंद्र सार को आपण मान जानते से जीवन को जेति की परखिछंती आम माने केही परखिनु एवं से देखंती एवं कहंती नहीं बेसी से जहाँ कहबार थाए तांकर ताकु कहंती तांकर गप माध्यम रे तेणु आसंतु तांकोठु सुनिबा से जीवन को किभली भाव रे भेटिचंती अनुभव करिचंती
अपर्णा ता वक्तव्य दे सारी ମୁଁ ଏଠି ଠିଆ ହେଇଛି କେବଳ ତାକୁ ରିପିଟ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ। ଶ୍ରଦ୍ଧେୟ ଦୀପକ ଏବଂ ମୋ ସାମ୍ନାରେ ଥିବା ଆପଣମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ଛୋଟ ଘଟଣାକୁ ନେଇକରି ହିଁ ମୁଁ ମୋର ବକ୍ତବ୍ୟ ଉପସ୍ଥାପନ କରୁଛି। କିଛି ଖରାପ ଭାବେ ନାହିଁ। ଇଏ ହେଉଛି ବୋଧହୁଏ 4-5 ମାସ ତଳର ଘଟଣା। ମୋ ପାଖକୁ ଗୋଟାଏ ସଫେଦ ଜରିର ଚଦର ଘୋଡ଼େଇ ହୋଇ ଗୋଟେ ମୋଟା ଖାମଟେ ପହଞ୍ଚିଲା। ମୋଟା ଲଫାଫାଟେ, ତା ଉପରେ ଜରିର ଫର୍ଦ୍ଦଟେ ଥିଲା। ସେ ଖାମ ଆସିଥିଲା ବମ୍ବେରୁ, ମୁମ୍ବାଇ। ସେ ଖାମ ସହିତ ମୁଁ ଟିକେ ପରିଚିତ ଥିଲି। ଏଇଥିପାଇଁ ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ବୋଧେ 5-6 ବର୍ଷ ପୂର୍ବରୁ ମୁଁ ଅନୁରୂପ ଖାମଟେ ପାଇଥିଲି। ସେ ଖାମ ଖୋଲିଲି। ଆଉ ତା ଭିତରେ ସୁଦୃଶ୍ୟ ଅତି ଚମତ୍କାର ଦେଖାଯାଉଥିବା 4-5ଟା ଲଫାଫା ଥିଲା। ଚିତ୍ରିତ ସେ ଲଫାଫା ଗୁଡ଼ିକ। ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ଲଫାଫା ଭିତରେ ଥିଲା ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ ଗ୍ରିଟିଂସ୍ କାର୍ଡ। ବାର୍ଥଡେ ପାଇଁ, ଆସୁଥିବା ନବବର୍ଷ ପାଇଁ, ଇତ୍ୟାଦି ଇତ୍ୟାଦି। କେବଳ ମୁଁ ନୁହେଁ, ସୁଧୀବୃନ୍ଦ, ଆପଣମାନେ ବି ମୁଗ୍ଧ ହେଇଯାଇଥାନ୍ତେ, ବିଭୋର ହେଇଯାଇଥାନ୍ତେ ସେ ଖାମ ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ଉପରେ ଅଙ୍କା ହେଇଥିବା ଚିତ୍ର ଦେଖି ଏବଂ ଭିତରେ ଥିବା ଗ୍ରିଟିଂସ୍ କାର୍ଡ ଉପରେ ଥିବା ଚିତ୍ରକୁ ଦେଖି। କଣ ବିଶେଷତ୍ୱ ଥିଲା ସେଗୁଡ଼ିକରେ? ଥିଲା। କାହିଁକି ସେଗୁଡ଼ିକୁ ଆଙ୍କିଥିଲେ? ସେ ଖାମ ଗୁଡ଼ିକର ଚିତ୍ର ଏବଂ ଗ୍ରିଟିଂସ୍ କାର୍ଡର ଚିତ୍ର ତାକୁ ଆଙ୍କିଥିଲେ ଯେଉଁ ଆର୍ଟିଷ୍ଟ 2 ଜଣ, ଗୋଟେ ଝିଅ ଗୋଟେ ପୁଅ। ସେମାନଙ୍କର ହାତ ନଥିଲା। ହାତ ନଥିବା ଆର୍ଟିଷ୍ଟ। ସେମାନେ ତୁଳିକୁ ଧରୁଥିଲେ। ଚିତ୍ର ଆଙ୍କିବା ପାଇଁ ତୁଳିକୁ ଧରୁଥିଲେ ଦୁଇ ଓଠ ସନ୍ଧିରେ ଆଉ ଗୋଡ଼ର ବୁଢ଼ା ଆଙ୍ଗୁଠି ଏବଂ ତା କଡ଼ର ଆଙ୍ଗୁଳି ସନ୍ଧିରେ। ମୁଁ ପ୍ରଥମ ଥର 4-5 ବର୍ଷ ପୂର୍ବେ ଏହି ପ୍ରକାରର କାର୍ଡ ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ପାଇ ଏମିତି ବିଭୋର ହେଇନଥିଲି ଏବଂ ମୋ ଭିତର ଏମିତି ଗୋଟେ ଅପୂର୍ବ ଆବେଗରେ ସ୍ପନ୍ଦିତ ହେଇନଥିଲା। ଏମିତି ଘଟେ, ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କ କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରେ ବି ସେମିତି ଘଟେ। ସେଇ ଜିନିଷଟିକୁ ଆପଣ ଦେଖୁଥିବେ, ସେଇ ଜିନିଷଟିକୁ ହୁଏତ ବାରମ୍ବାର ପଢୁଥିବେ, ଶୁଣୁଥିବେ, ଆପଣଙ୍କ ମନ ଭିତରେ ସେମିତି ଆବେଗ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ନ ହେଇପାରେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଏମିତି ଗୋଟେ ଦିବ୍ୟ ମୁହୂର୍ତ୍ତ ଆସିଯିବ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ସତ୍ତା, ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଆବେଗ, ହୃଦୟର ସ୍ପନ୍ଦନ ତା ସହିତ ସମ୍ପର୍କିତ ହେଇଯିବ। ସେଇ ପ୍ରକାରର ହେଲା ମୋର ଏଇଥର। ମୁଁ ଏଇ ଆର୍ଟିଷ୍ଟ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଗୋଟିଏ ପାଖରେ ଦେଖିଲି, ଅନ୍ୟ ପାଖରେ ସେମାନେ ଆଙ୍କିଥିବା ସେ ଚିତ୍ରକୁ ଦେଖିଲି। ବିଧାତା କୋଉ ପ୍ରକାରର ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ କରିକରି ଗଢ଼ିଥିଲା ଏଇ ଆର୍ଟିଷ୍ଟକୁ। ଏତେ ଅନ୍ୟମନସ୍କ ବିଧାତା ବେଳେ ବେଳେ ହେଇଯାଏ, ଏତେ ବେଶୀ ଅଯୌକ୍ତିକ, ଏତେ ବେଶୀ ଖାମଖିଆଲି ହେଇଯାଏ ବିଧାତା। କାହାକୁ କେତେବେଳେ କେମିତି ଗଢ଼େ ତାର ହିସାବ ତା ପାଖରେ ବି ନଥାଏ। ଏମିତି ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଦୁଇଟି ସତ୍ତା, ଆର୍ଟିଷ୍ଟ, ଏବଂ ସେମାନେ କରିଥାଉଛି। ବିଧାତା ଯୋଉଠି ଅନ୍ୟମନସ୍କ ହେଇ ପଡୁଛି, ସେଇଠି ଏଇ ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଶାରୀରିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିକୋଣରୁ ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଦୁଇଟି ସତ୍ତା କି ପ୍ରକାରର ଚିତ୍ର ଆଙ୍କି ଦେଇ ପାରୁଛନ୍ତି, ଯେଉଁ ଚିତ୍ର ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଚେତନାରେ, ଆପଣଙ୍କ ମନରେ, ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିଭଙ୍ଗୀରେ ଗୋଟାଏ ସ୍ଥାୟୀ ଆସନ ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରିଦେଇପାରେ। ଏ ସୃଜନଶୀଳତାର ଅପୂର୍ବ କୁହୁକ, ଯେଉଁ ଅପୂର୍ବ କୁହୁକ ବେଳେ ବେଳେ ମୋତେ ଲାଗେ ବିଧାତା ଠାରୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆହୁରି ବେଶୀ ଗରିଆନ ଏବଂ ଆହୁରି ବେଶୀ ଅଦ୍ଭୁତ ଧରଣର। ଆମେ ସବୁ ମଣିଷମାନେ ଏଇ ପ୍ରକାରର ଗୋଟିଏ ଗୋଟିଏ ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣତା ଧରିକରି ବଞ୍ଚି ରହିଥାଉ ଜନ୍ମରୁ ମୃତ୍ୟୁ ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ। ଆମ ଭିତରେ ଥାଏ ଅଭାବ ବୋଧ। ଆମେ ହାଇଁ ପାଇଁ ହଉ ଯେ ଏ ଜିନିଷଟି, ଏଇ ଉପାଦାନଟି, ଏଇ ମନସ୍କତାଟି ମୋ ଭିତରେ ଯଦି ରହିଥାନ୍ତା ତାହେଲେ ବୋଧହୁଏ ଜୀବନ ଆଉ ଟିକେ ଭଲ ହେଇଥାନ୍ତା। ସେ ମିଳେନି, ଆମ ଭାଗ୍ୟରେ ନଥାଏ ସେ ଜିନିଷଟି। କିନ୍ତୁ ଯେଉଁ ଜିନିଷଟି ଆମେ ଖୋଜୁଥାଉ ଅହରହ ପାଇବା ପାଇଁ ଆମ ଭିତରେ ବ୍ୟାକୁଳତା ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହେଉଥାଏ, ସେ ଜିନିଷଟିକୁ ପୂରଣ କରେ ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କର ସୃଜନଶୀଳତା। ଆପଣ ଏ ସୃଜନଶୀଳତା ଜରିଆରେ ହିଁ ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣାଙ୍ଗତା ପ୍ରାପ୍ତ ହୁଅନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ତାହା ହିଁ ସୃଜନଶୀଳତାର ଏତେ ବେଶୀ ଶାଶ୍ୱତ, ଏତେ ବେଶୀ ସୁନ୍ଦର, ଏତେ ବେଶୀ ସ୍ଥାୟୀ। ମୋର ୟା ଉପରେ ଅଧିକ ଆଉ କିଛି କହିବାର ନାହିଁ। ଆମେ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଟିକେ ଟିକେ ଲେଖାଲେଖି କରୁଛୁ, ଆମେ ଆମ ନିଜକୁ ହିଁ ଅତିକ୍ରମ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରୁ ଆମର ସୃଷ୍ଟି ଜରିଆରେ। ତା କାରଣ ଆପଣଙ୍କ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ତୁଳନାରେ ଆପଣ କିଛି ବି ନୁହନ୍ତି। ତା ତୁଳନାରେ ଆପଣ ମାମୁଲି ହିଁ ଜଣାପଡ଼ନ୍ତି। ତାହା ହିଁ ସୃଜନଶୀଳତା ଏତେ ବରିଆନ ବୋଲି ଆମେ ଭାବୁ ଏବଂ ତାହା ହିଁ ଆମ୍ଭମାନଙ୍କୁ ତିଷ୍ଠି ରହିବାରେ, ବଞ୍ଚି ରହିବାରେ ଏବଂ ଆକାଶରୁ ଆଞ୍ଜୁଳାଏ ତାରକା ଝାମ୍ପି ଆଣିବାରେ କିମ୍ବା ସାହାଯ୍ୟ କରେ। ଆମେ ଆମର ସୃଜନଶୀଳତା ଜରିଆରେ ହିଁ ଅସମ୍ଭବ ଜିନିଷକୁ ସମ୍ଭବ କରୁ ଏବଂ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ଜୀବନ ଏବଂ ସାହିତ୍ୟ ବା ସୃଜନଶୀଳତା ଏତେ ବେଶୀ ପରସ୍ପର ସହିତ ସଂଯୋଜିତ। ଜୀବନ ନାହିଁ ତ ସାହିତ୍ୟ ଆସିବ କୋଉଠୁ? ଆଉ ସାହିତ୍ୟ ଯଦି ଅଛି ତାହେଲେ ଜୀବନ ବି କେତେ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ଆକର୍ଷଣୀୟ, କେତେ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ରଙ୍ଗୀନ, କେତେ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ଭାସ୍କର୍ଯ୍ୟ, କେତେ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ଐଶ୍ୱର୍ଯ୍ୟପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ହେଇପାରେ। ମୋର କିଛି ଆଉ ଅଧିକ କହିବାର ନାହିଁ। ଆପଣ ମୋତେ ଶୁଣିଲେ କିମ୍ବା ମୋତେ ଶୁଣିଲା ଭଳି ମୋତେ ଜଣା ପଡ଼ିଲେ, ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କୁ ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ। ନମସ୍କାର।
ଆମେ ଶୁଣିଲେ ସାରଙ୍କ ଠାରୁ ତାଙ୍କ ଅନୁଭୂତି ସମ୍ପର୍କରେ, ସାହିତ୍ୟ ସମ୍ପର୍କରେ, ସେ ସମ୍ପର୍କରେ ଆଉ ବିଶେଷ କିଛି କହିବା ମୁଁ ଭାବୁଛି ଉଚିତ ହେବ ନାହିଁ। ଯାହା କୁହାଯାଏ ତ ଲାଷ୍ଟ ୱାର୍ଡ ବା ଯାହା ଶେଷ ସମସ୍ତେ। କିନ୍ତୁ ଆପଣ ଆଜି ମଧ୍ୟ ମୁଁ ଯଦି ସାରଙ୍କୁ ପଚାରିବି ଯେ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠ ସୃଷ୍ଟି କୋଉଟା, ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଭାବରେ ସାର କହିବେ ଯେ ଏବେ ସୁଦ୍ଧା ଘଟି ନାହିଁ। ତାର କାରଣ ହଉଛି ସବୁ କଳାକାର, ସବୁ ଲେଖକ, ସବୁ ଚିତ୍ରକର ଭାବନ୍ତି ଯେ ତାଙ୍କର ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ଆହୁରି ଘଟି ନାହିଁ। ତାର କାରଣ ହଉଛି ସେମାନେ ସବୁବେଳେ ନିଜ ସହିତ ସଂଘର୍ଷ କରୁଥାନ୍ତି। ଯାହା ଲେଖିଛନ୍ତି ତାଠୁ କେମିତି ଆହୁରି ଭଲ ଲେଖିବେ, ଯାହା ଅନ୍ୟମାନେ ଲେଖୁଛନ୍ତି ତାଠୁ କେମିତି ଭିନ୍ନ ହବ ସେଟା, ଏସବୁ ପ୍ରଶ୍ନ ସବୁବେଳେ ଜଣେ ସାହିତ୍ୟିକକୁ, ଜଣେ ଚିତ୍ରକରକୁ, ଜଣେ ଶିଳ୍ପୀକୁ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳିତ କରୁଥାଏ। ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠତ୍ୱଟା ଲକ୍ଷଣ ଗୋଟେ ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠତ୍ୱ ଗୋଟେ ଏଭଳି ଗୁଣ କୁହାଯାଇ ପାରେ ଯାହାକି ସମସ୍ତେ ଖୋଜୁଥାନ୍ତି ସନ୍ଧାନରେ ଥାନ୍ତି କିନ୍ତୁ କେହି ପ୍ରାୟ ପାଇପାରି ନଥାନ୍ତି କିନ୍ତୁ ଶ୍ରୋତା ଏବଂ ପାଠକଙ୍କ ମତ ଏ ଦିଗରେ ଅଧିକାଂଶ ସମୟରେ ଭିନ୍ନ ହେଇଥାଏ ଆମେ କହୁଛେ ଅମୁକ ଲେଖକଙ୍କର ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠ ନାଟକ ଏଇଟା ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠ ଗଳ୍ପ ଏଇଟା ଶ୍ରେଷ୍ଠ କବିତା ଏଇଟା କିନ୍ତୁ ଆପଣ ଯଦି ସେଇ ଶିଳ୍ପୀ ବା ସେଇ କବି ବା ସେଇ ଲେଖକଙ୍କୁ ପଚାରିବେ ମୁଁ ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଯେ ସେ ସହିତ ସେ ଏକମତ ହେବେ ନାହିଁ ତେବେ ସାହିତ୍ୟକୁ କୋଭଳି ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରେ ଦେଖନ୍ତି ଆମ ସମୟରେ ଜଣେ ଶକ୍ତିଶାଳୀ କବି ଅପର୍ଣ୍ଣା ମହାନ୍ତି ଆସନ୍ତୁ ତାଙ୍କଠୁ ଟିକେ ଶୁଣିବା
ଜୀବନ କଥା ତ ଚୁମ୍ବକରେ କହିଲି ମୋ ଜୀବନର ଯାତ୍ରା ସାହିତ୍ୟ କଥା ଏବେ କହିବି ସାହିତ୍ୟ ଲେଖୁଛି ବୋଲି ମୁଁ ପ୍ରଥମେ ଜାଣିନଥିଲି ପାଖାପାଖି 1976-77 ମସିହାରେ କବିତାଟିଏ ବାହାରି ଆସିଥିଲା ମୋ ପାଖରୁ ମୁଁ ଚୁପ୍ ରହିଛି ମୁଁ ଚୁପ୍ ରହିବାକୁ ମୋର ଚରିତ୍ର ଭାବିଛି ତୁମ ଦ୍ୱାରା ସମର୍ଥିତ ଗର୍ଭାଶୟଟିଏ ଛଡ଼ା ମୋର ଅନ୍ୟ କେଉଁ ସମ୍ମାନିତ ପରିଚୟ ନଥିଲେ ବି ମୁଁ ଚୁପ୍ ରହିଛି ଯଦିଓ ମୋର କହିବାର ଥିଲା ଅନେକ ଆଗରୁ ଯେ ମୁଖା ଖୋଲିଦିଅ ମୁଖା କି ବନ୍ଧୁ ହୋଇଛ ତୁମେ ଜୀବନର କେଉଁ ସହଯାତ୍ରୀ ଧିକ୍କାର ଧିକ୍କାର ଇତିହାସ ଆରମ୍ଭ କାଳରୁ ମାଂସଲୋଭୀ ପଦ ପ୍ରତିଷ୍ଠାର ସାଙ୍କୋଳିରେ ବନ୍ଧା ମାଂସଲୋଭୀ ଅଧିକାଂଶ ଶ୍ୱାନ ଆଉ ଶାର୍ଦୁଳଙ୍କୁ ପୁରୁଷ ବୋଲି ମତେ କରିବାକୁ ହୋଇଛି ସ୍ୱୀକାର ଧିକ୍କାର ଧିକ୍କାର ଏ କବିତା ଯେତେବେଳେ କେହି ଛାପିଲେ ନାହିଁ ମାଗାଜିନ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ପଠେଇଲି କହିଲେ ନାହିଁ ଏ କବିତା ଛପିବନି ଶେଷକୁ ପ୍ରତିବେଶୀରେ ବୋଧେ 1981 ମସିହାରେ ଏ କବିତାଟି ଛପିଥିଲା ଏବଂ ଏଇ କବିତାଟିକୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଜଣେ ଫୁଲବ୍ରାଇଟ୍ ସ୍କଲାର ଆସିଥିଲେ ଆର୍ଲିନ୍ ଜାଇଡ୍ ବୋଲି ସେ ବାଛିଥିଲେ ଯେ ଏଇଟିକୁ ଇନ୍ ଦେୟାର ଓନ୍ ଭଏସେସ୍ 1991ରେ ପେଙ୍ଗୁଇନ୍ ବୁକ୍ସରେ ଗୋଟେ ବାହାରିଛି ଫେମିନିଜିମ୍ କବିତାରେ ଟ୍ରାନ୍ସଲେଟେଡ୍ ହେଇକି ସେ ବାହାର କରିଥିଲେ କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ସାହିତ୍ୟର ଯୋଉ ସ୍ୱର ଏ ସ୍ୱର କେତେ ପୀଡ଼ାରୁ ଆସିଥିବ ମୋ ଜୀବନର ନିଜସ୍ୱ କେତେ ପୀଡ଼ାରୁ କେତେ ଦୁଃଖରୁ ଆସିଥିବ ଯେତେବେଳେ ମୁଁ ଆକୁ ଲେଖୁଛି ମୋ ଭିତରେ କ୍ରୋଧ ପୀଡ଼ା ସବୁ ମିଶାମିଶି କିନ୍ତୁ ତାପରେ ମତେ ମୋର ପାଠିକା ମାନେ କହିଲେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ବାହାରିଲା ଯେ ଆମେ କହିପାରୁନଥିଲୁ ଏ କଥା କେମିତି ଅପା ତମେ କହି ପକେଇଲ ଯେତେବେଳେ ବହୁତ ଲୋକ ନିନ୍ଦା କରୁଛନ୍ତି କିଛି ଏ ପୀଡ଼ାରେ ଘାରି ହେଉଥିବା ସ୍ତ୍ରୀ ଲୋକ ମଧ୍ୟ ମତେ ସେମାନେ ଫୋନ କରିକିନି ଚିଠି ଲେଖିକିନି ଏ ପୀଡ଼ା ସହିତ ନିଜର ପୀଡ଼ାକୁ ମିଶେଇ ଦଉଛନ୍ତି ତେଣୁ ସେ ସାହିତ୍ୟ ବି ଠିକ ସେଇଭଳି କଥା ରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ବେହେରା ଯୋଉ କହିଲେ ଯେତିକି କଥା ସାଧାରଣ ଭାବରେ କହିଲେ ତାଙ୍କର ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିଗତ ଜୀବନର ପୀଡ଼ା ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କର ଛାତ୍ରୀ ହିସାବରେ ସବୁବେଳେ ତାଙ୍କ ପାଖେ ପାଖେ ରହିବା ହିସାବରେ ମୁଁ କିଛି କିଛି ଜାଣିଛି ଥରେ ସାର୍ ଲେଖା ଲେଖି କରୁଥିବା ଗୋଟେ ଘରକୁ ମୁଁ ଚାଲିଗଲି ଯାଇ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଖୋଲିଦେଲି ସାର୍ଙ୍କର ମୁହଁ ହାତ ନାଲି ମାନେ ଭୋ ଭୋ ହେଇକି କାନ୍ଦି ପକଉଛନ୍ତି କହିଲେ ଆରେ ଅପର୍ଣ୍ଣା ମୁଁ କଣ ଏଠିକି ଖାଲି ଲେଖା ଲେଖି କରିବାକୁ ଆସେ ନିରୋଳାରେ ବସିକି ଟିକେ କାନ୍ଦିବା ପାଇଁ ମୁଁ ଆସେ ଏଠି ଖାଲି ମନ ଖୋଲି କାନ୍ଦିବା ପାଇଁ ମୁଁ ଆସେ କୋଉ ପୀଡ଼ା ତାଙ୍କୁ କାନ୍ଦିବା ପାଇଁ ବାଧ୍ୟ କରୁଥିବ ଏମିତି ନିଜକୁ କେମିତି ଭାବରେ ଅଜାଡ଼ି ଦଉଥିବେ ଯାହା କାହା ଆଗରେ ଅଜାଡ଼ି ପାରୁନଥିବେ ସେଟା କଲମରେ କାଗଜରେ ଅଜାଡ଼ି ହେଇଯାଉଥିବ ଏବଂ ସେତେବେଳେ ସେଇ ସୃଜନଶୀଳତାର ଯୋଉ ଦୁଃଖ ଯୋଉ ପୀଡ଼ା ଯେତେବେଳେ ସାହିତ୍ୟରେ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତିତ ହୁଏ ସେ ଦୁଃଖ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସାହିତ୍ୟକୁ ଚାଲିଯାଏ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଶବ୍ଦ ମାଧ୍ୟମରେ ପ୍ରକାଶିତ ହେଇଯାଏ ଅଧିକାଂଶ ଅନ୍ୟ ପାଠକ ମାନେ ନିଜର ଦୁଃଖକୁ ନିଜର ପୀଡ଼ାକୁ ତା ଭିତରେ ସେ ଅନୁଭବ କରନ୍ତି ମୁଁ ଜାଣେ ତାଙ୍କର ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ ଗପ ପଢିକିନି ପାଠକ ମାନେ କହିଛନ୍ତି ସାର୍ ମତେ କାହିଁକି ଆପଣ ଏତେ କାଲୁବାଲୁ କଲେ କହିଲେ ମୁଁ ଜାଣିଛି ସେ କୁକୁରଟି ଯୋଉ କଣ୍ଟା ବୁଦାରେ ପଡିଛି ସେଠି ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କୁ ପାଠକ ମାନେ କହିଛନ୍ତି ସେମିତି ଯୋଉମାନେ କବିତା ପଢିକିନି ଝିଅଟେ କହୁଛି ଯେ ଆପଣ ମିଛ ଲେଖୁଛନ୍ତି କବିତାରେ ଏତେ ଭଲ ପାଇବା କୋଉଠି କେହି ମଣିଷ ଦେଇପାରିବନି କାହିଁକି ନା ତା ଭିତରେ ଭଲ ପାଇବା ପାଇଁ ପ୍ରେମ ପାଇଁ ଯୋଉ ଜିଜ୍ଞାସା ଅଛି ଯୋଉ ଅନ୍ୱେଷା ଅଛି ମୁଁ ମୋ ପ୍ରେମ ପାଇଁ ଯୋଉ ଅନ୍ୱେଷାକୁ ନେଇକି ଶବ୍ଦ ଗୁଡ଼ିକୁ ଲେଖିଛି ସେ ତା ସହିତ ଖାପ ଖାଇଯାଉଛି ସ୍ତ୍ରୀ ଲୋକର ଯୋଉ ଭାବନାଟାକୁ ମୁଁ ନ ଲୁଚେଇକିନି ଏପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ନିଜେ ଭଲ ସ୍ତ୍ରୀ ଲୋକଟିଏ ହେବି ବୋଲି ନିଜର ଭାବନାକୁ ନ ଲୁଚେଇକିନି ନିଜର ଭାବନାକୁ ଅତି କଠିନ ଭାବରେ ପ୍ରକାଶ କରିଦେଲି ତା ଭିତରେ ସେ ନିଜକୁ ଖୋଜି ପାଉଛି तेणु साहित्य एमती संपर्कित हो जाउची जीवनर सुख तो अनेक प्रकार विलास तो अनेक प्रकार धन संपत्ति पद पदवी प्रतिष्ठा विलास दे पारिबो किंतु आनंद आत्मार संतोष जेतेबेले कथाटी कहि दिए निज भितर चापी हेइतिबा अकुहा कथा को जेतेबेले मनुष्य कहि पारे एवं से कथा आउ अनेक हृदयर प्रतिध्वनि सुना जाए सेतेबेले ता भितर गोटे आनंद सृष्टि हुए जेमती मीरा कहिथिले आंसू अन जल सींच सींच प्रेम बेल बोई अब तो बेल फैल गई आनंद फल होई अपर्णा महांती भितरे रामचंद्र बेहरा भितरे जेतेबेले पाठक पाठिका मानक पाखरु एमती टिके आसुची आनंद सेतेबेले आनंद फल फलिछि बोलिकिनी जानि पारुछंती एवं पीड़ा को भल पाई पारुछंती तेनु साहित्य सब बेले जीवनर पीड़ा को तार जंत्रणा को ता संघर्ष को प्रेम करिकी ताकू भल पाइकी आनंद फल रे परिवर्तित कर देबार जो प्रक्रिया टी आम भितरे चली थाए ताकू से कविता ही देई थाए गल्प ही देई थाए गुलजान कर गोटे छोटिया कविता मु अनुवाद करथिली जे जेतेबेले जीवन रे चाली चाली मु क्लांत होई पड़े थकी पड़े आउ बंची पारिबिनी बोली भाबे मोरी छोटिया कविता टीए मु आगु को चली आसे कहे दे मु कांधरे रखी दे तो दुखर गंठिलीटी मु तते आगु को बाट कढेई नेबी तेणु आगु को बाट फिटेई दिए साहित्य मु जाने मु मरीगला परे भी मो पीड़ार यात्रा समाप्त हेब नहीं मो शरीर में नथिला बेले भी जेतिकी लिखि देइछि ए पीड़ार यात्रा समाप्त हेब नहीं कारण जो माने पीड़ा भोगुचंती तांका पई आनंदर पथटीए टिके बाट कढेई नबारे आनंदर पथरे गोटे छोट फूल गछटीए हेकिनी तांकु टिके तांका मन को टिके शीतल करिवो तो साहित्य सहित मु भाबुछि मो जीवन रे जो दुख व्यथा आ सेथुरु सृजनशीलतार एमती गोटे संपर्क को नहीं साहित्य सृष्टि है मु किसी साहित्य लिखिनी से ठाकुरानीकर कृपा से मो शब्द को से प्रकाश करिवारे मोते माध्यम करचंती मात्र
बहुत भल कथा आपण कहले सॉक्रेटिस थरे कहिथिले जे पुरुष नारी विशेष करी विवाह परे गोटिए मुद्रार दुई पार्श्व पलटि जाती परस्पर एकाठी थांती किंतु कई कहार मुह देखि पारु न थांती किंतु मते लगे मोर व्यक्तिगत मत एटा कहि पारंती आपण जे जीवन एवं साहित्य से भली नुहे गोटिए मुद्रार दुई पार्श्व निश्चित किंतु परस्पर मुह देखु थांती परस्पर दुख सुख रे शामिल थांती एवं परस्पर सहित ही सब बेले थांती से दृष्टि विचार कले आमर साहित्य और जीवन अंगांगी भाव जड़ित आपण देखिथिबे जानिथिबे जे जतबेले भी आमे साहित्य रे बहुत बेसी परीक्षा निरीक्षा करिछु आमे पाठकक ठारू दूरेई जाइछु तार कारण होछि अन्य भाषा रे आमे जीवन ठारू दूरेई जाउ परीक्षा निरीक्षा विशेष करबा उचित नुहे मत लगे कले किछि असुविधा नाही किंतु जीवन को परखिबा आम निज कथा कहबाटा बेसी गुरुत्वपूर्ण आम चारिपटे थिबा लोकंक कथा कहबा बेसी गुरुत्वपूर्ण सेमानक जीवन को देखिबा एवं ता विषय कहबाटा अधिक गुरुत्वपूर्ण बोली मत लगे जमती कि आपणक चारिपार्श्व रे अछंती ए धन्य जो आमे आज ठीक आसचे आम गाड़ी रो ड्राइवर अछंती आमे बाटरे जो जलखिया खाइले से दुकानी अच्छी दुकान सामने ठिया हेकरी पैसा मागुथिबा पिला माने भी अछंती तो ए समस्त आम साहित्य पाई निहाती आवश्यक एवं आम जीवन पाई मध्य आवश्यक एमानक जीवन को बुझिवार अछि निजर जीवन को बुझिवार अछि ए दुईटा भितरे गोटे संपर्क जहा रही से संपर्क को मध्य बुझिवार आवश्यकता रही आमको समय हो जाइथिबार संकेत मिल साराणी तेणु आमे आजिर ई आलोचना को प्रथम सत्र को एटी रखिबा मो धन्यवाद देवी प्रथमे रामचंद्र सार को धन्यवाद देवी अपर्णा मैडम को धन्यवाद देवी आमर जो माने ए बड़ी गोटे मंच आमको देइचंती सेमानंकु एवं आपण मानंकु विशेष करी आपण माने नथिले मो जोटा आरंभ रे कहितली किछि भी संभव होई न थांता तेणु आपण माने निश्चित भाव रे धन्यवाद रो पात्र भलरे आपण साहित्य कार्यक्रम उपभोग करंतु धन्यवाद नमस्कार
थैंक यू सो मच आपन को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपण एठी आसिले हमको एते ब्यूटीफुल इनसाइट्स देले साहित्य और जीवन ऊपर डेफिनेटली ଯେମିତି sir କହିଲେ ଜୀବନ ଯଦି ନା ଥାନ୍ତା ସାହିତ୍ୟ କେମିତି ହବ। Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here on stage with us. We'll move on to the next session. Sir, I request you to please take the seat in the audience. If you please have a big round of applause. Please, I request everybody to clap. Thank you so much for being a lovely audience. All right, now moving on to the next session for the morning. We are running a bit late and thank you for being patient. We do not have any other option. We'll move on to the next session, which is Hunch Prose. Hunch Prose is a beautiful book of poetry by Ranjit Hoskote, who's a poet, art critic, and culture theorist who had also won Sahitya Academy Golden Jubilee Award. Penguin Books describes Hunch Prose as a book infused with wry humor, informed by the wisdom traditions. Hunch Prose urges us to look at our world and within ourselves with renewed ardor. Joining him as a moderator will be Dr. Piyush Roy, the director for Monarch of the Blue Mountain, the beautiful movie that we saw last evening. I request you to please take the stage and take it over from here, sir. I also request the audience to take their seats, and I would like to inform that we have ongoing sessions at Suraj Mahal and Bowling Alley at the moment. There's Joy of Learning, a session going on at Bowling Alley, and Sahitya or Nadiyan, another beautiful discussions happening at Suraj Mahal. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Am I audible? Okay, thank you. So, thank you, KLF, for this opportunity, and it's actually a pleasure and honor to discuss Ranjit Hoskote's new book of poetry. And I think going by the themes that we have seen yesterday and the themes that are lined up, the book, and I hope the discussion puts us in a context that we are in, and the context is also what the book is a lot about. I finished reading the entire poetry collection last evening, and I think it's therapeutic, it's insightful, it's reflective, and it also makes us think and think for ourselves. As every word, every image, we can own it through our own experience, as that poetry is supposed to be. So I think with that, we will straight away begin our conversation. So first of all, Ranjit, I want to ask, I mean, what I felt while reading it, it's a collection of amazing characters. And they're very interesting characters, but both animate and inanimate that we see, you have given them, even when you envision it that way, or how?
Piyush, thank you for your response to the book and for this question, which I'm actually quite excited by, because the book does emerge from the sense that, particularly at this moment in our planetary history, all our destinies are bound up together. Whether we are humans, whether we belong to other species, whether we are animate or inanimate. So there's really a very, very strong sense of being more vulnerable than we've ever been before under the sign of the ecological catastrophes that we've suffered. And also a sense that you can't really write poetry anymore that only emanates from a singularly personal voice, that there is a way in which we are all multitudes, as Walt Whitman said. So to me, that's where the poems come from, to see how our crises are also crises we share with other people, how we are defined not only by our own traumas, but by both traumas and possibilities that we share with other people and other species.
And when you're talking about other species, I'm just intrigued by this cover. And so it's a sea eagle, as you said. I'm unable to still pronounce the right technical word for that. How, why this image?
That's an osprey or a sea
Oh, yeah.
eagle. And it's a bird that I've been fascinated by for a very long time. And it's a bird that straddles earth, air, and water. So to me, it seems to me the perfect symbol for who we could be. I mean, how do we learn to navigate among different elements? We speak in, say, the Sanskrit tradition, we talk about the Panchamahabhuta. So how do you live in consonance with these elements? That to me is a very important question today. Again, many of the poems in Hunch prose have to do with an awareness that the landscapes, the cities, the topographies that we've all known and grown up with are in the process of irreversible change. So it's that sense of loss which animates the poems, but also a sense of, is it possible to live with the elements in a way that is not exploitative and not extractive?
You talked about the landscapes and possibilities, but I also see there is a whole range of thoughts from ancient times to the present, these and spirituality and philosophies. For example, you talk about Bhagavad Gita, lines from the Gita that have inspired. You talk about Ghalib. So this whole the whole range of inspirations or that have come in. Why did you pick up Hunch prose, that one particular poem, as the title? And since we're talking about a poetry book, I would like you to probably read that poem for us.
Sure, I could do that.
And then talk. We'll have some more readings done as well.
This is called Hunch prose. I mean, this is the title poem, Hunch prose. It came about from a sense of disquiet about what is the place of poetry. At a time when fiction or non-fiction make much larger and more persuasive claims to the public sphere, the question is, can poetry still do that? Can poetry be a public voice? So this was the disquiet from which this poem emerges, Hunch prose. He calls me Hunch prose, but what's a word between murderous rivals? Across from me he strops his fine blade, smooth talker, barefaced liar, misfort, teller of tall tales who wraps you up in his flying carpet, serves you snake oil, carries off the princess every time. And I, what can I offer you except fraying knots, coiled riddles, scrolled bones, keys to doors that were carted away by raiders, betrayed by splayed light and early snow, lost doors I could have opened with my breath. Call me Hunch praise. I bend over my ink drift words. And
What more could a poet offer than words is also a question that comes. But then poets time and again have given the sense to the sensibilities around them. And again, I think this book resonates a lot. I would want you to slightly throw some light on the times that have, you already talked about that in a larger ecological context, but a poet also reacts to other things that happen in his context, and those reactions come very strongly at times. So what would your take be on that?
But I'll also link that to the question you asked earlier, which I didn't really answer, which is, why is it that I return, say, to the Bhagavad Gita, as it might be in some other poems? It's not spelt out, but there's certainly a turning back to the Dhammapada, which is a Pali text that I've always been deeply committed to Ghalib, And for me, it's there's no contradiction here between being in the present and responding to all of these poets. To me, they're not dead in any text. I mean, texts live and resonate for us. They animate us, and they really are. You know, to me, Ghalib, although he passed on in 1869, is still a living presence. As is the author or the authors of the Gita, or the author or authors of the Dhammapada. These are, in some incredible sense, contemporary voices because they are not trapped in the limitations of context. They speak to us as people who are working through questions of how to lead a life through a world that's really a minefield. How do you define yourself through ethical choices? How do you reach for forms that will endure beyond the moment? So, you know, far too much of the modern or the contemporary starts with some kind of rupture with the past. But I think that actually there are energies, cultural energies that continue from, you know, whichever century that you get them from, and you create these precursors for yourself. So that's by way of responding to your question about the past. And, you know, in the period that I was writing Hunch Prose, I was very, very strongly aware of things that were melting down here around us. For instance, I think the situation in Kashmir was very alive to me at that point because of my own ancestral connections with Kashmir. So there are several poems that respond to that situation, not in an overt and direct way, but if you read them with some awareness of this, you'll see the references.
Another poem that struck me very strongly was Prayer. And your answer just now kind of leads to that. Maybe you could read the poem for us, and then maybe I should ask you to read one of your favorites.
This is called Prayer. Don't ask for the wall of the skin to break, the light blue line of morning to be drawn across your eyelids, the first watchful parrot of the day to ambush you with prayers. Peel back every proverb you were taught to reveal the raw welt of ardor until you find where the reluctant chronicler wrote, burn and dance because what is healed is dead.
Thank you. And you know, Ranjit, your writing so visual. I think it makes you again a very much a poet of this generation, which is increasingly, as we in our college call the teenagers are now screenagers. They age before the screen, and and that's something in all your they're very visual. Could you say something about that style? Is it as a conscious effort, or you see the world visually and you give them a meaning, or yeah?
And it's not a style, it's actually a neurological condition. I mean, I actually have synesthesia. So, and I didn't realize that was special for a long time until I realized it was. I tend to respond to the stimuli that come through one sense through another sense. So this possibility of translating from one sense to another has always strongly been with me. And in my other life, I actually am involved with the visual arts as a writer and a curator. So visuality has always been a very, very strong element of how I respond to the world. And I had resigned myself to aging quietly. I'm amazed to hear that some of these possibilities are very alive for teenagers today. But also, you know, jokes apart, I think for me, cinema of a certain kind was a very, very crucial form of growing up. And some of those filmmakers have, you know, been with me in my mind and consciousness forever. Tarkovsky, for instance, is very strongly present. Andrei Vajda, Guru Dutt, Istvan Sabo. So these are filmmakers I saw as a teenager. And that, I mean, the claim they make on the imagination, that's still with me all these decades later.
All those filmmakers that you just named about, they were huge experimenters with the medium and and important influential disruptors as well. Because the cinema that happened after them was of a different style, like Guru Dutt is, for example, often called the Orson Welles of India, because what he did with Citizen Kane, Guru Dutt kind of did with Pyasa. Again, a work with huge poetic sensibilities. Any other influences that you would like to share who have influenced you in your thinking, in your writing of poetry?
I would have to say, since we're talking about the visual, many painters who come to mind, but someone whose work I've been thinking about a lot, two people actually. Stan Brakhage, who was an experimental filmmaker and a thinker on film, is a very strong presence for me, because he was also thinking about how to deepen the possibilities of the medium, but also how to move it beyond itself. What happens when you take the print of a film and you scratch it or you paint over it, and then which medium functions of style or criticism. I mean, how do you leap beyond the parameters of your art? That moment is of great interest to me.
And since I come from more of a film studies background, I can say that experimental is the genre of the future. And with cinema filmmaking becoming more and more, free from the clutches of producers, and this whole zero budget cinema and all that coming in. So that's where I guess cinema claims its own character. And so I also find, a lot of the poems here are very cinematic. I have one more favorite one opened here, but would you like to read maybe one or two before I start nudging you for one more request? And then we will open it for Q&A.
I'll read one called Hawk. I mean, you talked about the sea eagle on the cover, but this one's called Hawk. Caught up on the wave of the past, a hawk skirls back, ripping the seamed and sutured scar of our passage. Its wings are lined with scripts no one can read, but everyone brawls over. In this city of howling dogs and winning saints, the blood that spurts under its claws is common, the sort you could smell anywhere, the sort you can smell everywhere. Suffer us all, dear God of many names, to come together and feed ourselves to that insatiable beak.
Thank you. So I think at this point, you're a Mumbaiker, right?
Well, I've spent most of my life in Bombay, yeah.
Okay, so one last request as a fellow Mumbaiker, Haji Ali, I have it open, 91. And this is a place, I think, again, it resonates a lot about what Mumbai is. People from all faiths throng. It doesn't belong to and then the sea is there. And again, a very visual poem. I could literally towards the end hear the waves crashing on the whirly sea face walls, kind of a thing. So, please,
Thank you.
Irshad.
This poem's called Haji Ali, and those of you who know Bombay, as Piyush does, will know that it's a tidal island on which stands a Sufi shrine, a dargah. But this whole seascape is changing incredibly because of the coastal road. So those waves that used to break against the shore are not going to break for much longer. So it's also a poem about loss of landscape and the loss precisely of those possibilities of a shrine where people came together from different religious backgrounds, different ethnicities. So here goes the poem. Haji Ali. You wouldn't remember me. I came and went like rain out of season. At Haji Ali, the stoplights changed without recording my passage. I stumbled along the beach, the sea snapping at my heels, guardian angel of the weather with one wing broken. I couldn't stop summer when it prowled and roared in streets that should have been flooded. Every screen in every movie hall was set to 0 or lower. I couldn't push back the tide when it washed over the narrow road, pointing to the Saints' Island. All I could do when I left was to gather up and carry every one of your boats away. They're riding at anchor in this song you've been trying to write. I think actually we're at a point where there's a hello.
Okay. So my question was that, in a time of, the trend of doing poetry as terribly tiny tales, and also like, what happens to the long form? And then, and what are your thoughts about the poems or the poetry of the future, if we could see it visually?
There are times when I think that apart from the nature and magnitude of technology, not a lot changes. Because I think in every age, what is of interest is that there's a scale of forms. So if you want to look back 2,000 years, you will still find that there's the one-line sutra, which is extremely potent in what it contains. And then you can have a whole epic, an agatha, an itihasa, anything you like, which can extend on a vast scale. I think it's the same today. I think there are possibilities of very, very crisp and condensed forms, but also vast forms which extend across media. And to me, that is the excitement of this historical moment. And in that context, I should just say that I've now been working on a translation of Mir Taki Mir from the Urdu, which began as a Twitter project. It was a series of ashar. I used to take the transliteration of the sher in the original Urdu, my translation in English, and an image from Mughal or Pahari or Rajput painting. And there was a whole climate of discussion, a microclimate of discussion that emerged around that. So far from rejecting new technologies, I would actually embrace them to see what their literary possibilities are.
So I think this is a good point to open up for questions. And then, but before and after that, we will wrap up with one more reading. So anybody in the audience? Or we will do some more readings.
So maybe I'll read a couple of poems and then we could finish off with a question. This one's called The Book of Common Birds. Look after these birds. To the goose, skirting the edge of the creek, leave your hands. The gull, gliding to a perch in the mangroves, can have your feet. The vulture, skulking above the towers of silence, could use your ears. The owl, spy master of the people, gets your eyes. Your hopes could shimmer through the rainbow-throated pigeon, its head cocked for runaway trains. For the Siberian crane, winter refugee, spare your memories of rain, sketched across lighthouse and bay. But your voice, let it ransom the peacock held captive in the zoo. spelling yourself in a tongue of fire, you'd be so much grain cracking in the beak of a bird, molting out of itself, a thing of air and water again. Yeah, I guess some of these are also rather pensive and grim poems, but that was also for all kinds of personal reasons, where there was a very, very strong sense of the presence of mortality and question of what happens to us after we're gone. Yeah, this one's called Bone Setter. You mend what's snagged, fix what's gone out of true. The bulging knuckle, the scuffed runaway shoe that hides a spur, the cracked femur, the twisted knee. Stoic, you repair us for combat. We go out again and again at the emperor's pleasure, but in the end the arena takes no prisoners. We walk out holding our heads high in our stiff raised hands, your sutures an embroidery of carbon dust.
So are we? Okay, we can wrap up. So, thank you once again, Ranjit, for those beautiful readings. And I think the beautiful thoughts, grim or otherwise, thoughts are thoughts. And what is grim today may be revealing at a different point and context of time. You have a question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if hosts are, hosts can ask questions, but I do have one. Because your poems are very, I think I see a lot of imagery in your poems. It makes you visualize things, right? How can one practice imagery? Because as a poet, even I use a lot of imagery, and I'm not sure where they come from. So how does one create an inspired way of practicing imagery?
I don't know if, often it's the images that dictate our way forward. So I don't know that we can practice or build up a repertoire of images. I think what's more important is to be responsive to the very diverse sources that the images come from. I think it's an attentiveness that we need to practice as poets more than a set of images.
More like reflect and see the world in a different...
And just be attentive to the world, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Beautiful poems. Thank you for reading them out to us. And thank you so much, Dr. Piyush Roy, for being here. I would request you to remain seated as we proceed towards the next session. And sir, I'd request you to please take...
Piyush, thank you so much. And thank you all for your attention.
As beautifully said in the session further ahead, it reminds me of a line from a song that it's only words, and words are all we have to take your heart away. And this literary festival explains exactly that. It's only words. We'll move on to our next session. And in this session, we are going to discuss Dr. Piyush Roy's beautiful movie,